Guys, thanks a million for joining. So I'm Nicky Usher, as Claire mentioned, work for Sigmar Recruitment, one of the biggest sort of agencies within the country. So, on a daily basis, I could be looking at 10, 20. I've even had days where I've looked at about 100 CVs. So I don't know if I'm quite an expert, but I can sort of give you an idea what sort of stands out for someone who's looking at sort of a high volume of applicants with regards to CVs. Believe it or not, it's kind of one of the most competitive steps within sort of trying to get a job, or if you're moving positions, because just due to the fact that you're generally up against a high sort of volume of applicants as well. So it's, for me, it's kind of about small things with CVs, which is what we're going to kind of touch on today and sort of have a look at the importance of a CV. So just looking at kind of what we're going to look at today. There's myself there. Little introduction. I won't give it to you for the third time. I won't bore you. But I sort of work across the tech sector, I suppose. So mostly within sales. So I would deal with some of the big corporates, the likes of say Google and Microsoft and Facebook as well. So that sort of expands onto dealing with sort of multilingual roles as well. So dealing with people coming from sort of very different backgrounds. And then I also look at some marketing work as well. So the CVs that I look at will be different from your sales to the sort of multilingual customer service roles to your marketing roles. So just going to have a little introduction to what we're going to be covering. So we're going to look at what a CV is, why it's important to build a good CV, look at some sort of some basic rules, sort of do's and do nots, I suppose, and then sort of difference between a good and a bad CV. I'll let you guys sort of pick out what you like about the CV and why one might be good, why one might be bad, and then look at what sort of how we build a strong CV. For me, it's the small details, assuming that the information is going to be somewhat similar, because when you're putting up a job ad for, say, a customer service rep, or if you're looking for an entry into your sales positions, you tend to get similar sort of experiences. So for the purpose of this, you don't have to have the strongest CV in the world. And when I talk about building a strong CV, it doesn't mean that you have to have all really, really good experience. What I'm looking at is the small details that are going to make a CV stand out. Okay. And then we're going to have a little look at what a sort of things to add and maybe things to avoid adding. Of course, this is all sort of my opinion. So what I might say might be different to what other people would say, but what I'm just trying to do is really highlight what stands out for me as someone who looks at a lot of CVs on a daily basis. And then we'll look at if you guys have any questions. I'd be happy to try and help anyway, answer them. So what is a CV, and why do we think a CV is important? Does anyone, so we've got Max, we've got Saoirse, we've got Anne, and we've got Dara. Does anybody want to sort of tell me or give me a couple of ideas of what a CV is or why it might be important? Okay. Well, look, I'll give you a few ideas of why we think a CV is important and what it really is. So a CV is really a controllable introduction of yourself, right? So if you think about it, similar enough to, say, a flyer for maybe a new gym that's opening up, or a flyer for a brochure for a supermarket, right? What that would have is sort of, contact information, where the shop is, maybe, a menu of what they would be selling, that type of thing. So what the CV really does is it just sort of highlights your experience that you think will be relevant to the role. So what we're looking for within a CV are sort of, contact details. So your sort of email and phone number. If you have a LinkedIn profile, that's brilliant as well. A snapshot of your relevant work experience. So what some people will do will list every job that they've ever had, which isn't necessarily the case. And you might have what's called a master CV, and then for each different job that you would apply for, you'd make it more relevant. So if you're going for a sales job, you'd be noting your sort of customer service experience and the transferable skills, which we'll also touch on as well. An overview of your educational background is always good as well. And then reference details. So a point of reference is really if you might be offered a job, and then it might say pending references. So what that means is that they're going to just have a chat with your former employers, and they'll be fact checking to see if you were working there for that time, what your work ethic was like, that kind of thing. And then skills and languages, if you have them, brilliant to have. Obviously not going to be completely necessary for every role, but as I said, I work within the multilingual sectors here, so I'd be looking at sort of languages on a daily basis. Interests and hobbies, again, it's kind of one of those that can be up for, do I put it on, don't I? For me, when you're looking at a CV, it's about building a rapport straight away. If I can look at someone's interests and find out, that maybe they like football or they like running or they like cooking, these are sort of a little bit more than just looking at a blank CV that doesn't have that. So it gives me a little bit of an idea about the person. As I said, very small details for me. And then sort of as an overview to why the CV is important, it gives you a slight insight into the administration and the attention to detail that the person displays. Simply put, if I'm looking at a CV and there's maybe a lot of spelling mistakes, or if it's missing information, if this is kind of what you're putting forward, so it might just give a slight indication into your work. As I said, it doesn't mean that you're going to be a good or a bad worker or a good or bad employee. It's just sort of an indication. So as I said, very small details, but we'll touch on that. And that's sort of one thing that I am big on, is it's very small details that makes a strong CV. So some basic rules for writing a CV. So as I sort of mentioned, each CV should be tailored to each job that you're going for. So what I tell candidates is that they might have their master's CV that might have all of their information. Okay. And what they will do then for each job is have a look at the job description and look at the key details and the duties of what they're looking for, and then edit in your information on your relevant jobs that you have done. So when we're talking about, relevant skills, if it was for a sales position and you have experience working in customer service or any customer facing role, you would highlight those duties to say, I have experience dealing with customers, because that might seem obvious to you, maybe it won't, but someone, say, going for maybe an accountancy role wouldn't need those skills. So it's important to sort of highlight the experiences that you have and not to leave really anything out or, up for debate. So what might be obvious to you might necessarily be obvious to somebody else, if that makes sense. So we always like to, show the employer through your CV. So don't leave it up for them to wonder or think about it. Try and give it to them, really. Um, your CV has to be truthful, right? But it doesn't have to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So what I mean by that is you can't lie in your CV. But what you can do, or what you're not really supposed to do, is put all of the information about every single job. So if you put yourself in my shoes, where I'm looking at maybe, let's say, 10 or 20 CVs, and the majority might be 1 and 2 pages. If I'm looking at the last CV and it's 5 to 6 pages long, I'm probably just not going to read the whole thing. And you can put that down to it's human nature, right? We're not robots. I can't be expected to read every single bit of information off every single CV when I'm dealing with up to 100 CVs. So what I mean by that is trying to keep it sort of concise and to the point. What a lot of people will do is sort of put every bit of information that they do on a daily basis, from getting up in the morning to opening the door, going to work. These things that we don't need to really know because everybody does them. So it's keeping it relevant, I suppose. Another one to point out is sort of gaps in the CV. Does everybody kind of know what I mean by gaps in the CV? Or I can sort of elaborate on what that means. What gaps in the CV is, quite simply, is gaps where you maybe have been out of work, maybe you might have been traveling, maybe you took time out for personal reasons. There's nothing wrong with that. It's human nature. But I think you're better off addressing these gaps on the CVs, quite simply because if your CV gets looked at and you get called forward for an interview, let's say, which is the main reason why we're sending out the CV, you're going to be asked it anyway. So I like to address the gaps within the CV, which you'll see when we'll have a look at a CV in real life, what I mean by that. So I work with, as I said, Google here. So Google, you can't have any gaps in the CV of longer than 3 months. So quite often when I'm dealing with candidates, I'll say, look, you just need to fill in what you were doing. What were you doing? I was traveling. Okay, well, where were you traveling? And they might tell you, a couple of countries where maybe they speak the language. And like I said, coming back to small details again, that might show that you were then using that language. So what I'm trying to get at here is that everything that might think is it might come against you that you weren't working, at the same time can sort of work for you in small ways as well. Like I said, small details. Um, Over 2 pages, I would say, is probably too long for a CV, right? Now that being said, there is exceptions. I've worked sort of CEO positions that they have to put forward proposals and they have to include sort of business plans and whatnot. But for your general run-of-the-mill role, I'd say try and keep it to 1 page, maybe 2 pages max, but that's sort of a general rule of thumb. Again, there's always going to be, the odd exception, but as a general rule of thumb, I would try to keep it under 2 pages. So we'll have a look at two CVs here, okay? And these are two CVs with pretty much the exact same information. Now, if I was to, the CV on the right, if we were to get all of the information on, we'd probably be looking at 2 or 3 pages, which sort of, summarizes or highlights the point that I've kind of just made. So looking at the two CVs there, does anybody want to sort of tell me which CV they prefer, if it's maybe the left or the right? Or maybe which one is sort of which one is stronger? Claire, which one jumps out to you?
I would say the one on the left with the picture, the same as Dara. Dara's saying left in the chat as well.
Thanks, Dara. Yeah. So I would say the exact same, right? So I'd be on the side of the left. And the reason that is, there's a couple of small details that we'll look at. But first of all, like Claire said, it's the picture that stands out. So some people will tell you to put a picture on a CV, others will tell you not to. Where my stance is, if I'm looking at 10 CVs that all have very similar information and one of them has a picture, the one with the picture is the one that stands out to me, even a small bit. Okay, and as I said, coming back to small details, that one is more appealing. Now we'll have a look at why else it's more appealing, but they're the exact same information, believe it or not, right? So that's why when I'm talking about that, you don't have to have the strongest in terms of the experience. I'm talking about the small details, what's going to make it stand out, because you're trying to grab the attention of the person looking at CVs. You just have to assume that they're not necessarily going to be able to read everything. So you want to give it to them as plain and simply as possible. So look at the small details. Is there anything there? So is there anything there that sort of stands out? If you want to even put it in the chat, there is absolutely fine. Is there anything that stands out to you guys there? Give us a couple of the details there that we think would be good.
He's explained his gaps like by putting in the time off traveling.
What's that, sorry?
He's explained the gaps by putting in the time off traveling. So like, so you can see there on the work experience, he's
Exactly.
clearly stated that in between working Super Value and working the pub, he had time off and he was traveling between 2019 and 2020.
Exactly. Thank you, Saoirse. Dead right. So that is 1 point. So that's our relevant experience. Yeah, definitely covered that off. Anything else that jumps off the page for people that sort of catches the eye?
Bullet pointing the tasks or the duties that will be associated with the roles.
100%. Yeah, definitely. So what Saoirse is alluding to there is when people put their work experience, they'll often put sort of paragraphs. What's more sort of striking is using the bullet points there, because it's easy to look at. As I said, it's trying to make your CV as easy to look at and as easy to, that I can just pick the points and have a look at it very simply. So excellent point. Yeah, thanks, Saoirse. Anything else that people like or think, is there anything that people don't like that they want to maybe challenge on that they don't think should be there? Okay, we'll have a look. One thing for me when we're talking about small details is using a template. Okay, does everybody know what I mean by using a template as opposed to just writing on a Word document or Google Drive either? They're both do the same function really. Do people know what I mean by a template? Does anybody want to give me give me an idea of what I mean by the template?
Me again. Basically, what you're looking at is that you're looking at a structure and a layout of a form, more so than just kind of winging it and putting something together that might look mismatched or jumbled. So the structure there, like the, for instance, he has his education, his work experience, and his skills, so it's unified and formatted. So every time he'll send that out, he'll have that same format, but he might have a few tweaks depending on the role. So that would be a form of a template, and even he might change that again depending on the role. So he mightn't have that picture, the profile statement on the left-hand side as what he has there currently on that layout.
100%. 100%. Thanks very much, Saoirse, and Dara as well for pointing that out as well. So you're dead right. What a template is it's a way of formatting the information. Okay, so these are all, you can get them on Word, as I said, you can get them on Google Drive either, and there's thousands of templates that you can choose from. So what I find is important is having it, that it looks nice and it looks presentable. I'll often get CVs that are just Word documents with writing, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, and the information is still the same, but it's just trying to make it more appealing to look at. And I think that looks very kind of clean cut. So, I can see the profile, I can see the contact details, the languages, it all sort of stands out. Now, some people will go the other way and have a little bit too heavily formatted, and they've got all sort of crazy colors, and they've got crazy template or crazy writing on the CV, and that doesn't always, it sometimes works. Sometimes within the marketing world, it's definitely very appealing, but on some sort of there's some softwares that we would use to have a look at CVs, and they don't often, more often than not, they don't actually come through. So it might just come through as little squares on the page, in which case I can't see what you're actually trying to put. So it's important to pick a nice template, but one that's sort of clear and that's easy to read, right? You're trying to make the person's job as easy to look at this CV and say that I am the person for this job. Okay, so excellent points there on the template. The picture, we sort of already touched on that. Now, I'm not entirely sure why John is in a doctor's jacket here, but however, he's got a picture which I think makes it more appealing. As I said, if I'm looking at 10 CVs and one of them has a picture, for me, it's the one with the picture that just makes me think I can put a face to the name. And that's all it really is. So some people will tell you not to put a picture. I would argue, why not? It's something a little bit more in depth than just a little bit of information on yourself. But as I said, some people would tell you to do it. Some people would tell you not to do it. The profile. Does anybody know what the idea of the profile is? And when I say the profile, I mean this little, just a little. It's just a little introduction there. Does anybody have any ideas or thoughts why that might be important?
Does it give the candidate an opportunity to introduce themselves, I suppose, in a little way, and to hit on some of the key words maybe that someone like yourself, the recruiter, are looking for, so you can kind of see this is the person that could fill this role?
Yep, definitely. Saoirse, what about yourself?
Well, I was going to pretty much say the same as Claire. You're kind of summarising yourself and your skills to kind of just make yourself stand out a bit more. So that kind of thing that draws in the eyes of the recruiter to see, well, where are these skills that they're mentioning in the summary that they have.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's exactly it. So believe it or believe it not, right? And you do get a lot of this where people will just send CVs to every job and they'll send the same CV. Okay. So you'll see more often than not, I'll see the same applicant applying to 3 or 4 of my roles that are quite different. And my colleague will see the same person. Okay. Which means that they're probably just firing off the same CV to any role. So if you take the time to do this properly, okay, and if I can see Saoirse's CV coming through, and I read the profile and said she's a hardworking, ambitious individual, which is what a lot of CVs will tend to say, but I'll show you how we can sort of show that as opposed to just telling. Looking to move into a customer-facing role within the commercial sector of an exciting technology company. So let's say I'm recruiting for Google. Okay. And this is the CV that comes in from Saoirse. So then I'm going to have a look at her work experience and make sure that, you know, it's kind of the background that we're looking for. But I can see that she really wants this role. So this is what we're talking about, tweaking each CV to relevant to the job spec. So you can sort of, you know, if you're sending that CV to maybe an accountancy role, working as an accountant, you're just going to say, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That's just been sent to one CV that's been sent out to both, and it's not really what we do here. Whereas for me, because it's been tailored to the job that I'm looking for, that I'm working on, I can see that you're interested in it. And believe it or believe it or not, you might think that everybody does this, but they don't. So that's what I'm saying. It is definitely worth doing a profile. Now, some people will put a profile that's nearly half a page long. I don't think you need that. It's just a snapshot. Me, the recruiter, I look at that. I see what search is interested. What about contact information? What do you think we need in terms of contact information? Does anybody think that you would send a CV without contact information?
No. Your email, your phone number, the key ways to contact them for you to be contacted.
Yeah, 100%. Believe it or believe it not, I've received applicants to job ads that I have up that are very relevant to the role, but don't have any contact information. So someone who I would have picked up the phone and said straight away, I want to talk to them, I can't because I don't have their contact information. So it does happen, okay? So make sure that you've got your phone number is correct. Make sure that it's an email address that works and you haven't, you know, it's spelled correctly. But more importantly than that, make sure that you're checking that email address, because that's something that will happen as well. As a first point of call, I'll try to pick up the phone and speak to the person, because you can get a gauge of what they're kind of like and get a feel for the person. I like to speak to the people as opposed to just sending an email, right? But if I send an email saying, John, tried contacting you, I'd like to speak to you about my role, and it goes into an account that you don't monitor, I will also miss the opportunity to speak to you. What also happens is, as a recruiter, my emails often get pushed to junk or spam. I don't know why, but however. So I have to sort of remind people to just keep an eye on junk or spam, that it might go into those. So it's important to make sure that you're using an email address that you use, okay? LinkedIn, if you have it, is a great tool, because I suppose digital age here, I can just go onto your LinkedIn profile, have a look, make sure that everything sort of checks out. So, you know, that is a LinkedIn I definitely recommend if you're not already on LinkedIn. But location as well, not necessarily, don't 100% need it, but quite simply, you know, if I am looking for a salesperson that's based in Raheny, ideally, and that is ideally, if I can see that your location is Raheny there, then you're on the right foot already. So it's very small little things like that. It's not going to be a deciding factor, but it definitely helps. Relevant experience. So what do we mean when we say relevant experience? So Saoirse kind of touched on it there. Is there anything else that anybody wants to throw in about relevant experience? Emphasis on the word relevant.
Very good, very good. I got your email. Sorry, I was on a Google call.
Sorry, I've a bit of noise here in my room now as well. But what we mean by relevant experience is experience that is going to be necessary for the role that you're going for, right? So a lot of people will put tons and tons of information on their CV to sort of fill it out, which for me as a recruiter, when I'm looking at that, I'm just looking at what's relevant. So when we talk about relevant experience, if John is going for a customer service role, what I can see there is that he has experience dealing with the customers in SuperValu, but also previous to that in the pub as well. So when we're talking about relevant experience, have a look at the job spec and see if that sort of matches up with what you have in your master CV, so to speak. Education. If you have, if you've got a junior certificate, or if you've got a leaving certificate, I think it's good to put it on. If you've got sort of a diploma, or if you've got a degree, if you've got a master's degree, I think there, all relevant to put down. That being said, I would usually limit it to 2 if we have 2. If you've only got 1, that's no problem at all. But I'd limit it to 2. So when we say the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, if you've got a degree, you don't have to put your degree, your diploma, your secondary school, your junior school. You don't need to really do all of that. I would limit it to 2, really. Then moving on to languages, as I said, I recruit a lot within the multilingual sector, so it is definitely something that I'm looking out for on a daily basis. And believe it or believe it not, I get CVs from people that say from France or Spain or Germany that I know to be French, German, or Spanish because of where they've worked and maybe their name possibly even, but they haven't listed the language. So that's up for me to be cute about it and think that they have the language, but they haven't necessarily put it down. So don't sell yourself short, right? If you've got languages, be it different international languages, if you've got computer languages, which is a whole other language in itself, put that down. So as I said, this CV is just trying to give all of your relevant experience. Then the skills. So if you look down the bottom, I've got kind of communication, team player, leader, trustworthy, and ambitious. They're kind of things that you see on a CV every day. Okay, so I'll see skills here and I'll just see those sort of things listed. So what I've done here is, given examples of these skills. So what we're doing there is demonstrating rather than just telling. Okay, so communication on a daily basis, I help customers find what they're looking for. So you have to be sort of open to being customer focused there, and you have to listen to what they're looking for, and you have to be able to work out where maybe that is and help them find it. Like I said, these are all very sort of obvious points, but again, you're just trying to demonstrate your skills. Team player, work as part of a team on a daily basis. I also played maybe football or any sport for 10 years. That's something that people overlook, saying that you played as part of a team, because that is playing as part of a team. That is being a team player if you've played any team sports. A leader. I'm captain of my football team. I also train some new staff in as well. So that would indicate sort of leadership qualities if you're training in new staff. Trustworthy, I'm a key holder. That's a great one if you can say you're a key holder in any of your positions. And then ambitious. So I undertook a diploma in business while working full time. So what we're trying to do there is demonstrate our skills as opposed to just saying them. Okay, because people do this the whole time. They'll put, I'm a good communicator, and that's open to interpretation, so if we can sort of demonstrate those as opposed to just telling them. So like I said, those are some of the small details that I would look out for. Okay, so picking a good template, picture whether you want to or not. I would advise to a little profile, contact information, very important, relevant experience, your education, your language, and your skills. So they're things that I think make up this CV to be better than, go all the way back, better than that. So do we see why now, looking at the small details, why they're different and what I mean by that? Does anybody have anything to anything to add on that? I'm going to go on mute because I have a little bit of noise in here. Does anyone have anything to add on that or see my point there?
Can I just ask a question about kind of looking after education? In my role, I would come across a lot of people who'd either be really engaged in education, but they might already have, say, multiple qualifications, including, say, higher research, their degree, diploma, maybe postgrad. So should they list all that, or should they just choose maybe the master's and maybe a higher research, like if it's level 9 over the degree, if you're kind of recommending maybe putting 2 in? Or should they list their bachelor's as well with that?
It's a good question, Sisha. As a general rule of thumb, I would go the sort of the higher the degree or the higher the certificate over. So if you've got a level 9, I would definitely put that over, your level 7 if you have that. As I said, it's going to be sort of horses for courses. So you're going to tailor your CV for the job that you're applying for. So if you've a degree in HR, and then you've a master's in something else, I would definitely be highlighting that degree in HR. But as a general rule of thumb, I would try to keep the higher your certificate above the others, and then try to keep it to about 2. There's no harm if you put in more, but that would just be sort of my my advice. So to tailor each CV and to make the relevant, to have the relevant degree on it, if that makes sense. Does that sort of answer your question there?
It kind of does, yeah, because like I've come across a lot of people as well then with say parts of their CPD, they might have had to do maybe QQI training on top of the higher level. So the kind of the QQI training would be SET. So like they would put that in to show that they would have continuous professional development. So I'm just kind of like looking at the CV there. So how would you demonstrate as well that in part of education you were doing continuous professional development to show your skills like ECDL or business administration 5 or 6 on top of that to show that you're relevancy to the roles as well?
So what I come across a lot of the time is sort of linked in with their skills. So they might say skills and continuous development. As I said, I was just trying to get this onto one page for sort of, theatrical purposes, I suppose. But you could stretch this over 2 pages and have your continual learning, right? Which I think is a really good thing to do. And you can list all the skills or all the courses that you've done, the extracurricular activities. But what that also does is it also backs up if you've sort of what we call gaps, or if you've time where you're not working, that you were continuously upskilling, that you're continuously doing something. So that shows, a bit of ambition, shows a bit of drive, because, it's definitely been a tough market. But what I get from a lot of people, and there was a lot of people let go throughout COVID, what I get a lot of the time is, I was just let go throughout COVID. Okay, that's a year and a half ago. What have you been doing since? So if you can back that up with sort of that you've been upskilling and that you've been training, that shows that, you've got a bit of drive about you and that you've been keeping yourself sort of busy and motivated. So I don't think there's anything wrong with listing them under your education. Continuous education is absolutely fine, but for the purpose of this, I just wanted to keep it to one CV. But you're dead right. I'd list everything that you've done, especially if it's relevant. I hope that kind of answers. We'll skip through this again. So we're going to look at a couple of things here to add or not to add. Obviously, these are going to be up to debate, but this is sort of my opinion, sort of industry opinion, sort of even to an extent. As I said, studied HR a long while back now, but there is sort of things that you would have been told not to put on a CV, and we'll sort of touch on why as well. So the first one being date of birth. What do people think? Does anybody want to just give a yes or no?
No.
And why is that?
It's not necessarily relevant to the role. I don't know, maybe you might open yourself to maybe some sort of prejudice or unconscious prejudice maybe, or bias. Yeah. I don't know.
Yep, 100%. So I would say no on date of birth. We'll cover why in a minute. What about gender?
I'd say no again on gender.
I don't know. Okay. The reason why no on date of birth and gender is it's one of the 9 grounds for discrimination. Okay. So there's no need for it to be honest. So, whether you're a man or a woman, what age you are shouldn't hinder whether or not you get the job. Just as the other 9 grounds, which would be your marital status, your family status, your age, if you have a disability, your sexual orientation, your race, religion, and if you're a member of the traveling community. So you don't need to put any of this information on it, because it's just opening up for possible discrimination cases. So leave it off. There's no need to have it on it. Okay. So the next one is address. What do we think about address?
I would say put your address in, because depending on where the job is in your location, it can sometimes, as you pointed out there, if there's a job in Raheny and you see somebody in Raheny, you're most likely going to lean towards them. So there's no point in somebody like me in the middle of Sligo applying for a job in Raheny if I can't move.
100%. Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. For that basically simple factor, if the job's there and you're there, it's a perfect fit. It's not always going to be the case. You might be the other side of the city. You might be the other side of the country, like Sergio said. So I would 100%. I'd put the address on it. It's not the end of the world if you don't. But what could happen? You could get a call. Sergio, I think you could be very relevant for this role. Whereabouts are you living? I'm living in Sligo. This job's in Raheny. In which case, you're sort of, But I would put it on, yes. So what about photo? We've kind of touched on that. What's the consensus now? What do people think? So you know what I think. What do does anybody disagree? Does anybody think no? It's okay to go against what I say as well, by the way. Are we all in agreement then that photo should probably be yes?
Yeah.
Not the end of the world if not?
Yeah.
Okay. What about leaving or junior certificate results?
If they're your only qualification, yes, I would put them in. But as you stated earlier, if you have something higher, like after leaving cert, like a associate degree or CTY level 6, then you can start dropping the junior cert results and so on.
Yeah, I would agree with Saoirse 100%. If they are if that's what you have, then perfect, put them on. But as a general rule of thumb, if you've done maybe a level 7 or a level 8, I would leave them off. Also, if it was maybe 5, 10 years ago, probably not going to be too relevant. So as a general rule of thumb, I wouldn't. But if they are the only qualifications that you have and you're proud of them, then stick them on. So general rule of thumb, no, but that's kind of open to debate. Hobbies. So what do we think? So I sort of touched on it earlier, but let's say, Dara, for your next CV, are you going to put your hobbies on it? Answer through the chat is absolutely fine as well. Sure. Okay. So I would, right? The plain fact being that, CVs are generally not looked at by robots, right? So if I'm looking at a CV and there's something that I can sort of, if I know the hiring manager, let's say I know the hiring manager is a fan of hiking, and I can see that you've got hiking on your in your hobbies, there might be a connection there. It's very, very small. It's very small, but it does also, it gives a better idea of the person that behind the CV, and then it can also, it could also just strike that you have the same hobby with the hiring manager, in which case I'll know, yeah, I think they'll click with the hiring manager. So it's, it's a very small thing. It's some people will tell you not to. I would say to do it. It's an introduction is what the CV is. So I would say, why not? Reference details. So what I mean by reference details is, do we put the, let's say Dara was your last hiring manager. Do we put Dara's details in every CV? So his email address and his phone number, and do we put them on and send them to every job that we're going to apply for? What do we think?
No.
Why is that?
I definitely say that because I always found that even when kind of advising people and putting references on CVs, you want to see, is the employer interested? So you want them to come back to you and say, I would like to get a couple of your references so that I can follow up on the skills and experience. And at least that way, the CV has been looked at, they're interested. The next stage is that they might be interested in hiring, so they want the reference details.
100%. Yep. I mean, on top of all of that, which are, they're all very relevant points. On top of all of that, you've got the whole sort of, you've got the whole GDPR issue. So you have to get their permission before sending them out. I wouldn't advise doing it anyway, because, once somebody's CV or once somebody's information is out there in the public domain, it's hard to get it back. On top of all the sort of, scams and sort of data breaches that there is or going around at the moment, I would definitely say, references available upon request or something like that. So that would be sort of my advice there. So look, that's just a couple of things that that I come across on a daily basis that I think are sort of, definitely up for negotiation. There's some of them that I would say definitely don't put on. But there's a couple of things there just to give you an idea. What about every single job you've ever had?
No, you wouldn't put down every single job, because you could have had multiple roles depending on the type of employment. Like there's a saying, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary job, depending on the climate and the type of role. So if you had a number of specific purpose contracts, and then you had maybe fixed-term contracts, you would go with obviously the most recent, but anything that that you feel that you can leave out, you might make reference to in the cover letter if you want to cover that off.
100%. Yeah, yeah, I would. I'd agree with that. So that it comes back to, relevant experience. So making it relevant. As I said, you can have the jobs that you had on a master CV, but we're going to sort of copy and paste. What I see a lot is sort of other work experience in which people kind of list the jobs that sort of counteract sort of gaps in the CV. So that's another way to approach it as well. But definitely, every job you've ever had, definitely not, because you do get it where you're looking at CVs that are 5 pages long that don't need to be 5 pages long. And if I'm looking at that after I've looked at 20 CVs, I'm just not going to read it because I just don't have the time, unfortunately. As I said, it's all down to human nature. We're not robots. So that kind of brings us to it. Every job, no. So do we think we could, I'm sure you probably could before, but do you think we could design a CV now that would be more sort of, that would jump out or that would stand out a little bit better? What do we think?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Very good. Is there anything that sort of anything that stands out or jumps out at you? Good man, Dara. Is there anything that jumps out at you as sort of key points that you might take away from this?
Definitely the idea of the less is more template. So like that people could use that as well as the 2-page template, depending on what they're applying for. And I think on kind of the 1-page one, the picture is a very good idea. To kind of humanize the CV, that you're not just looking at words on a page, that it puts it, as you said, a face to the name.
Definitely. So thanks very much, Saoirse. Some really good points there. And I'd be delighted if the only thing you came away with this was thinking to use a template. I'd be delighted, because if I could see more CVs with better templates, I'd be happier in my job. Dara, yeah, excellent point on the photo as well as Saoirse. I love my job, by the way. I really like what I do, but yeah, it can be frustrating when you get CVs that that people haven't put any effort into. So when I'm reading it, it's I'm looking for the information first and foremost, but I'm when I'm looking at a CV, I'm trying to build a connection. If I can see a photo, if I can see that you've put time and effort into it, I'm definitely more likely to pick up the phone to you. And that's what this whole thing has kind of been about. How do you get someone to pick up the phone is kind of what I'm kind of going for here. What about Max and Anne? If you want to sort of put in the chat, is there anything that that you could sort of take away from this that you think would be you'd be able to put into your next CV maybe? If you want to put it in the chat, that's absolutely fine. Cool. So look, we'll move on anyway. If there's anything that people want to add into the chat, that's absolutely fine. The last slide is really just questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and just sort of open it up to if there is any questions that people have. So please just feel free to shout out. I'd be delighted to sort of add some of my experience or try and help. Is there any questions that anyone has? If they want to put it in chat as well, that's absolutely fine.
I actually have a quick question for you, Nikki, if that's okay. Just on the address piece and just talking about location, have you found since COVID there are more jobs out there that have options for remote working, or you don't necessarily have to be in the office? Has that kind of become a little bit more common from your experience?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, great question. Because that's sort of, I suppose pre-COVID, it was very seldom that you see roles that could be worked from home, whereas now it's sort of the norm. That being said, there's a lot of our clients that are looking for people to come into the office, be it on a hybrid, or if they want to work fully remote. If they want to work fully in the office, they're kind of giving them the options. So here I'm in the office full time, and the main reason being that I like getting up. I cycle in the morning. I've got my desk here. I've got my my 2 screens that I can work off. I've got my colleague over there that I can bounce ideas off. So for me, I prefer coming in here. But for other people that want to work fully remote, I've got lots of clients that are offering fully remote. Even over the last few weeks, we've seen clients that were very much, no, we want people in the office, and sort of they've got kickback from the market saying that no, we want fully remote. So 100% it is something that it's just part and parcel now, and I don't think that's going to change. I think people will start coming into the office a little bit more, and definitely I'm seeing in the middle of town here that it's definitely got a lot busier over the last few weeks. But 100%, yeah, pretty much every one of my clients is offering remote working.
So just for say some of the participants who might be on the call today, is it worth on your CV or even necessary to include a piece to say that you're comfortable with Zoom or you're comfortable with Google Hangouts? Is that a necessary to include in your CV at that point, or would that be something that comes later on, do you think?
I would say yes, because, and I'll give you an example of why. So we were actually, we've got 3 new people joining us over the next few weeks. One thing that we're big on that not other agencies do is video outreaches. So that means getting comfortable in front of a camera, saying, Claire, I really like your experience working in X. I think you'd be very relevant for a really exciting job that I am working on with Y. To do that, you have to be comfortable getting on video. Right. So it's something that we would have got a lot of applicants, but as soon as you speak to them and say to them, you're going to have to do videos, no. So it is definitely something, you can put under your skills, and it's something that I see a lot of is, comfortable on Microsoft Teams, comfortable on Zoom, comfortable on Vidyard, comfortable on WebEx, whatever it is. It's definitely something within my sector, within the tech sector, it's sort of something that is somewhat assumed. But it is, if you're comfortable getting on those kind of platforms, I definitely put it in, because believe it or not everybody is. So if you are, definitely highlight it. What I've also seen that has been kind of creative is under your computer programs or anything that you're sort of comfortable with, is sort of putting the Zoom logo or the Teams logo, that kind of thing. But I would say yes. Why not? Not everybody is. So if you are, definitely.